Chapter 33. A New Resolve on My Third Birthday. Chapter 33. A New Resolve on My Third Birthday. In the mountain range that towered over the eastern and western sides of Talosheim, the capital of the sun, the champion Zachard had left behind mercury mirrors that he had created using secret alchemy techniques. The mirrors of liquid mercury reflected the sunlight towards the city, granting Talosheim the same amount of daylight hours as any place on level ground. And so the long, thin rice that could be harvested 3 times a year, similar to the rice of India on Earth, was cultivated, filling the stomachs of the race that needed large amounts of food. More than half of the country's territory was covered in devil's nests, but because of that, the crops grew quickly and yielded harvests 3 times as plentiful as crops growing in other lands. However, during the war with the Merkshield nation, the fields became grasslands ruled by monsters, and all of the mercury mirrors were destroyed. Leaving that sad history aside, Vandalyu was working on making something to play with today as well. "King, what are you making?" "Child." Before he knew it, the Black Goblin, Anubis and Orcus children had gathered around him. Only a few months had passed since their birth, but not a single one of them was smaller than Vandalyu now. He had heard that monsters developed at a quick pace, but seeing it with his own eyes was a shocking thing. Hearing that the Black Goblins were actually developing slower than purebreed goblins was even more surprising. "Is it a weapon?" "Braga." "Not quite, Braga." Vandalyu. Braga, one of the Black Goblin children, thought that the wooden disc-shaped object that Vandalyu was shaping with his golem transmutation might be a throwing weapon like a boomerang, but it wasn't a weapon. "I know, it's a plate." "Zamito." "Byago." "To replace the leaves that Mom has been using recently." "Gorba." Zamito, a young Anubis with a tough-looking head of a dog, and Gorba, an Orcus who was already the size of the average human adult, guessed that it might be a plate, but that was wrong as well. "Then what is it? Tell us too." Mimetiga, Zamito's older twin sister, or younger twin sister. Mimetiga, who was his twin sister either way, was curious as well. "It's a toy," Vandalyu told her. "A toy." "Children." As his friends spoke simultaneously and turned their heads in confusion, Vandalyu adjusted the fine balance of the wooden disc. Finally satisfied with that, the last thing he did was to use what was inside a barrel that he had set aside. Rubber. He turned some of the rubber into a rubber golem and covered the disc in it so that it wouldn't hurt if it hit someone. It was quite unrefined, but it was finished. "This is a toy called a frisbee." Vandalyu. What Vandalyu had created was a frisbee. He had thrown sticks when playing with Bone Wolf, but he had thought it might be more interesting to use a frisbee like people did on Earth. In Lambda, sports and toys were underdeveloped. Every country held tournaments for athletics and combat, and there were even dolls and stuffed toys. But there were no frisbees or sports that involved the use of balls. Well, they might be out there somewhere if one looked hard enough. And so Vandalyu had decided to try making one himself. Fortunately, there was more than enough wood lying around, and even more fortunately, there were rubber trees. So Vandalyu made rubber golems from their natural rubber to use it for things like grips and cushioning material. "This frisbee, you throw it," Vandalyu. "Hit people with it. And then you win by defeating everyone." "Child." "It's a toy that you throw, catch and throw back to the person who threw it to you." Vandalyu. As Vandalyu's friends seemed to have dangerous thoughts about the frisbee, he wondered if he should have made balls first. But he generally disliked ball sports, so he didn't have much desire to make them. Because he had been a loner at school, to him, ball sports had been nothing but pain inflicted onto him during physical education classes. They were nothing but a way to show off the achievements of popular people. "For now, I'll show you the basics. Try throwing it." Vandalyu. That day, Bajia thought of calling out to Vandalyu after she got back from her session of monster hunting and training, and happened to come across this scene. Bajia. Vandalyu was chasing after a small disc that was spinning through the air. He caught the disc, and then threw it back towards the children, who were standing far away from him. "Is this some kind of training?" "No, he's supposed to be resting. So are they playing?" Bajia. Bajia thought for a moment that they were undergoing some kind of training where they were learning to catch a thrown weapon out of the air and throw it back at the enemy, but the atmosphere around them didn't seem like they were training, so she decided to stand there and observe. After observing a little, she understood that they were playing. But from just observing, she couldn't understand what could be so fun about it. "Here it comes, King!" Orcus. The Orcus boy holding the disc gave a large swing of his arm and threw it. Because he possessed the superhuman strength skill that granted him great physical strength from birth, the disc flew high, very quickly. This is Vandaliu. It was impossible for Vandaliu to catch it, so Bajia thought. But Vandaliu ran at one of the nearby ruined walls and, without slowing down at all, began climbing it like a four-legged animal. She thought that he was using magic, but it seemed that he was using his claws. Van looks thin, but he has a lot of strength, and he's quicker than he himself thinks. As expected of the man I'm expecting to be the father of my second child. Bajia. Giving a satisfied nod and thinking more positively of Vandaliu, Bajia decided that she would talk to him later and left so that she wouldn't be in their way. And thus frisbees became popular among the ghouls, black goblins, and the Anubises in particular. But its popularity was dubious among the Titans and Orcuses. There was currently a large amount of materials that had been brought into Talosheim. Over 90% of those were the products obtained by the undead Titans who worked under Borkus to exterminate the influence of the exterior devils' nests from Talosheim. There were large quantities of monster meat, timber, medicinal plants, herbs, and goods of Talosheim that the Merg Shield Nation had either abandoned or never found in the first place. Most of them were still usable. The rate at which more materials were brought in was faster than the rate at which they could be processed, so Vandaliu had simply cast preservation on them, and they were lying in a huge pile. Among the quickly gathering materials were coins that were used as the Orbom Kingdom's currency 200 years ago, copper and silver coins of various sizes, things that had no use now. The Merg Shield Nation had probably taken gold coins and any coins more valuable than those, but the silver coins and coins worth less than them had been abandoned. If one were to polish these coins and take them to the Orbom Kingdom, they could likely be used as currency except for the badly damaged ones. The currency might have been revised in the past 200 years, but they would at least hold the value of the copper and silver that the coins were made of. If lucky, they might be worth a premium, the way that old coins on Earth were valued by enthusiastic collectors. But right now, there was really no way to use them. What shall we do with these? Vandaliu. There's nothing to do with them. For now, let us store them somewhere until you go to the Orbom Kingdom, Vansama. Teria! Teria was getting her back rubbed by Vandaliu after having come back from changing her job to her original job of arms, smith, at the job-changing room, in the Ruined Adventurers Guild. Currency revisions are quite uncommon, so I believe that there should be no problem. However, I am not knowledgeable about the Orbom Kingdom, even if you ask Kachia and the others. They're harder. Teria! You're right. They're enemy nations who have done nothing but wage war against each other after all. Vandaliu. Neighboring countries would normally have people going back and forth across the border, but unfortunately Viscount Balchest region, in which Kachia and the other former adventurers had been active in when they were still human, were not adjacent to the Orbom Kingdom. No, even in areas where the Merg Shield Nation and Orbom Kingdom shared a border, almost nobody did business across them other than black market dealers. These two nations have been enemies ever since their foundation, and apparently many of the Orbom Kingdom's duchies had been taken back as a result of a ghastly conflict that had occurred only a few years ago, so there was hardly an atmosphere to be doing business with each other. But if one were to question whether the nations still functioned properly, the answer was yes. The Amid Empire covered a third of the continent, half of the continent if one was to only consider the regions that were inhabitable by humans, and it did commercial business with nearby island nations and other continents. Thus, the empire had no economic problems or problems regarding the acquisition of food. The state of the Orbom Kingdom wasn't known, but it likely didn't suffer from any problems for the same reasons. The duchies had originally been individual small countries, and they were likely able to trade with nations outside the continent through the kingdom. Vandaliu had thought of taking the coins that he had taken from the bandits around Evbigia to the Orbom Kingdom and exchange them there, but considering these facts, it would probably be better if he didn't. It felt like a waste, but it was probably best to simply melt them down into metal. I'll ask craftsman Datera later. Vandaliu. Datera was an undead titan who had been an elderly blacksmith when he was alive. He had continued swinging his hammer for 200 years. Well, swinging his hammer, but not actually making anything. He had regained a little of his sanity and memories when he met Vandaliu, and now he was struggling to restore his workplace. His various tools had corroded, he wouldn't be able to work unless he made them all from scratch again. That is a good idea. I am still unable to use metal. Teria was a skilled arms smith with high skill levels. However, she was unskilled in the use of metal. Arm smiths in the world of Lambda mainly use materials taken from monsters to create their weapons and armor. They do not use metal very often, unlike the swordsmiths and weaponsmiths that one would imagine on Earth, who would forge metal to create swords and katanas. Even if they do, they would only use mithril powder or orichalcum fragments as catalysts, or use iron to make clasps for armor. The blacksmiths who primarily use metals are craftsmen who create arms using copper, bronze, iron, adamantite or orichalcum as the base materials, with materials from monsters used only as catalysts. The skills and tools used by the two types of craftsmen are different. In Teria's case in particular, she had trained her skills after becoming a ghoul in a devil's nest forest, where metal had been scarce. The last time she had used metal in her work was over 200 years ago. If I had the tools, as long as I am not needed to create something, I think that I would be able to at least melt down coins, you know? But if there is a specialist around, it is best to leave it to him. Teria, you're right. And Datera would probably be angry if I didn't ask him to do it. Vandaliu. Datera was a moody old man. If he were to discover that Vandaliu had given this task to Teria, who was unskilled in the handling of metal, he would get very angry indeed. And since he was now an undead, whose emotions often went out of control, there was a chance that this anger would be permanent. And moody old men, in general, seemed like they would be scary if they got angry. Still, how shameful of me. To become overenthusiastic and NNH caused pain to my back. Teria, the friendly, 264-year-old Teria, who looked like a friendly person in her teenage years, had been rendered helpless by a back injury. Because the job-changing room in the Adventurers Guild was usable, all of the ghouls, including Teria, had acquired jobs. Jobs were blessings granted to people by the gods even before the appearance of the Demon King. Obviously, monsters couldn't undergo job changes. That applied even for Sam and Waza, who had been people before becoming undead. However, ghouls were one of the races that Vita had given birth to alongside the vampires. They were half monster, but as the other part counted as human, they could undergo job changes. This was certainly the case considering that Teria and Kachia had retained the bonuses to their attribute values and skills of the jobs they had possessed as humans, even after becoming ghouls. And so the ghouls who had lived in a devil's nest up until now, unable to use a city's job-changing room or make one of their own, had used the job-changing room available to them in Talosheim. Thus, Teria was able to change from the job that she had been forced into when she was sold by her family and had long since reached level 100 in, the prostitute job, to her original job of arms smith. Now I can become a renowned craftsman, an artisan that I had dreamed of being as a human. Teria! She had been very happy. Renowned craftsman and artisan would be honorable titles given to skilled craftsmen on Earth, but in Lambda, they were the common superior jobs that all crafting-related jobs shared, including arms smith. These jobs would be displayed as artisan, arms smith or arms smith, artisan. And so in order to gain experience points and increase her level, Teria had begun working with unknown materials such as those from raptors and flying sharks, but she had been overenthusiastic. I understand how you feel, you know. Vandaliu understood the feeling of being unable to acquire a job. He really did. As he said this, Vandaliu numbed the pain in Teria's back with death attribute magic, used spirit form transformation on a part of his body, and slipped it into Teria's, and eased the stiffening in her muscles. If I was able to do this on Earth, I might have been able to open my own store. Vandaliu, spirit form massages, we definitely understand your muscle pains better than low-frequency massagers. Probably not. As Vandaliu released the tension in her muscles, he also secretly checked on the condition of her body, but there seemed to be no problems. There were no signs of declining organ function. Ah, Teria! Had she noticed? I just suddenly thought of something. Can you not manipulate metal with golem transmutation? Vansama, I am sure that there are golems made of copper, iron and mithril. Teria! Apparently not. It wasn't as if Vandaliu was doing anything bad, but he felt a little relieved as he answered Teria's question. I can. It uses up more mana than when I make golems from rocks, though. I've never had a chance to try it with mithril, but I think it should work. Vandaliu. Like Teria, Vandaliu's exclusion from human society meant that his opportunity to work with metal was limited. However, he had tested it with small amounts of iron before, and he had succeeded in creating an iron golem that could fit in the palm of his hand. But I still can't do much other than make large changes to their shape. I can do things like make pit dwellings, fix houses made of stone and straighten bent pieces of metal, but for example, Vandaliu used golem transmutation to change the shape of some copper coins and turn them into a sword. I see, this is no good. Teria knew that this sword would be useless with a single glance. It was nothing but a lump of copper in the shape of a sword. The blade had no edge at all. It wouldn't even be able to cut a branch. It was a thin, blunt weapon rather than a sword. This is how it is. I can't make a statue of stone and earth that resembles a person exactly, or apply fine details. Vandaliu. As he spoke, Vandaliu used golems of earth and stone to make a doll that resembling Teria, but while it did have the shape of a woman, the facial features were rough and details like the fingers were very crude. Using golem transmutation like this, he couldn't create small details. Even when constructing houses, he could only create pit dwellings. Building complicated, tall buildings like houses on Earth would be impossible. Even when making weapons, at best he would be able to have molten metal pour itself into a mold. The casting process, even that was impossible unless the mold for the desired shape was already made for him. In order to become able to create smaller details, he would likely need skills like blacksmithing and carpentry in addition to the golem transmutation skills. In fact, he had already acquired the carpentry skill by making pit dwellings using golem transmutation. That meant that he had gained the experience required to learn the techniques of carpentry. In other words, he had actively used the carpentry skill. Well, I can remove impurities from metal like this. Vandaliu. The copper sword began to quiver, and dust-like particles began to fall out of it right before their eyes. And then the sword of copper was shining brilliantly, as if it had completely transformed. This is copper. It shines like a gem. Vansama, this is amazing. If you are able to purify copper like this, and the same can be done with iron, this is a technique that would be desired all over the world. Teria. In Lambda, raising the purity of a substance to 100% was impossible with technology alone. There were almost no examples of even skilled earth attribute mages succeeding in doing such a thing. Historically, some mages had produced metal with 100% purity, but only with minute amounts of metal used to begin with. Such techniques could not be used industrially. And so if Vandaliu was able to create 100% pure iron, he would rival those skilled historical mages. No, there was a chance that he would surpass them. However, Vandaliu showed no signs of pride. That might be true, but this is actually really tiring. Vandaliu. It consumes a large quantity of mana, doesn't it? Teria. No, it really tires my brain out. Vandaliu. Vandaliu lay down and rested his forehead against Teria's back. Feeling how hot it was, Teria let out her voice in surprise. A fever. Vansama, your forehead is almost hot enough to burn me. Teria. This is known as a magic fever. If you surpass the limits of your intelligence to force out a complicated spell, this is apparently what happens. Vandaliu. The intelligence stat displayed on one's status governs magic and martial techniques, representing the amount that one's brain can process and the speed with which it does so. If those limits are surpassed, a fever is developed, like a computer that has been overclocked. Using golem transmutation to purify copper, as Vandaliu had shown Teria, didn't consume much mana. Perhaps it would be different for other mages, but for Vandaliu, who possessed a mana pool of 100 million, it was a truly minuscule amount. What he was actually doing was middle school level science. He was simply transmuting the copper with the image of ejecting all of the non-copper material from within it. Though earth attribute mages manipulated minerals, they were unable to increase their purity. The reason for this was likely because they didn't understand the molecular structure of metals. Nobody could blame them, as this was a fantasy world with no electron microscopes. However, Vandaliu understood the concept of molecules, but increasing the purity of a single kilogram of copper to 100% had caused a fever intense enough to make his consciousness hazy, so the technique itself did indeed seem difficult. Or maybe my intelligence is just too low. I have a feeling there's a good way around this, but... Terria's back feels good. As Vandaliu set heat-absorbing demon fires around himself and pressed his forehead against Terria's back, he suddenly realized something. Come to think of it, Terria's. Vandaliu. Yes, my what? Teria. Upper arms are thick and muscular, aren't they? Vandaliu. That is where you want to touch. There are plenty of other good places, you know. If it is you, Van-sama, I would not mind if your hand were to slip a little. Teria. Other places. Your back is muscular too, isn't it? Vandaliu. Though armed smiths didn't swing hammers like blacksmiths, they still used a considerable amount of physical strength. That was why Teria had more muscle on her arms and back than one would suspect, though few had noticed this due to her wearing clothes and ornaments that covered her back and upper arms to conceal it. No. Why are you choosing only places like that? Teria. Teria was covering her face in shame, but Vandaliu had only meant it as a normal compliment. Muscles were splendid things. They were powerful justice, powerful beauty, powerful muscles. Even if one didn't have such extreme opinions, would lean muscles not be considered attractive? I don't need any more massaging, Ogu. Teria. But perhaps squirming around with Vandaliu on her back had been a bad idea. Teria's hips gave an unpleasant clicking sound. There aren't any problems with the bones. You have a strained back. Vandaliu. Teria suddenly stopped moving, and Vandaliu used his magic once more to numb her pain and cool down the affected area. Strained backs were incredible, to even render a ghoul possessing the pain resistance skill to become half unconscious. Incidentally, this was the first time the term strained back had been used in Lambda, and in the years and months to come, the term would spread from Talosheim all over the continent. But right now, nobody was aware of that. Translator's note: this is notable in Japanese because the term is a rather unusual one, /gakurigashi, where /gakuri is an onomatopoeic sound, I think, and /gashi means hip/back, so it's something like clicked back? Anyway, it sounds weird if you don't know what the word means. There you are, boy. So, who is this lying down like that? Zadiri's. It's Teria. She can't move because she injured her back. Vandaliu. It was in the evening, which came early in Talosheim, when a lively-looking Zadiri's came to see Vandaliu. She injured her back, you say? As to be expected from an elderly person. Zadiri's. Kia, even though you are 30 years older than I am. I hope you get a strained back yourself. Teria. Strained. Well, I do understand that you are cursing me. Zadiri's. Translator's note: Zadiri's reaction to the word is like this because of the above-mentioned onomatopoeic sound. Though Vandaliu had numbed the pain, the injury hadn't actually been healed, so Teria was lying still to recover. As Zadiri's looked closely, she saw that Vandaliu's arms had fused into Teria's back. What are you doing? Zadiri's. Spirit form assimilation therapy. If I turn my body into spirit form and fuse it with Teria's, she becomes able to use my rapid healing skill. I can't use healing magic, but I tried to see if there was anything I could do, and this is what I came up with. Vandaliu. Fufufu, are you jealous? Van-sama and I have become one. No, you cannot shake me. Stop it, you insolent little girl. Teria. I am only doing this because you show no respect for your elders. Good grief. Zadiri's. Satisfied at making Teria scream after being teased by her, Zadiri's whispered into Vandaliu's ear with a serious expression on her face. Is it her lifespan that is in danger? Zadiri's. No, she's just old. I can't see a shadow of death, so I think she'll be fine as long as she doesn't push herself. Vandaliu. She will, so that is impossible. Zadiri's. You're right. I'll ask her soon if she wants me to use youth transformation for her. Vandaliu. Teria hurting her back twice in a row might have just been something unique to Teria, but Vandaliu and Zadiri suspected that it might be because she was aging. They might have been overthinking it, but it would be best to reverse her age and have her become healthy again long before the shadow of death became visible. Come to think of it, how is your training? Vandaliu. It is going well. I have become level 100, so I am due to change job again tomorrow. Zadiri's. The ghouls who had undergone job changes had acquired apprentice jobs to begin with. All kinds of apprentice jobs existed, such as apprentice warrior, apprentice mage, apprentice arms smith, and apprentice maid. As their names suggested, they were apprentices, so the bonuses to their attribute values and skills were weak. However, the bonuses were spread widely over their skills, so everyone could take their own strengths and weaknesses into consideration as they trained and planned out what skills they wanted to obtain. Zadiris and the other ghouls had increased the levels of their apprentice jobs to their limit in the space of just a few days, but they were a special case. Humans with apprentice jobs were normally not much different from average people. Beginning from this date, they would train with wooden swords and spears, have practice battles, fight rank 1 monsters such as goblins, big frogs and living bones under the supervision of a mentor, and slowly gain experience points. But ghouls were at least as strong as rank 3 monsters to begin with and already possessed numerous battle-related skills. Thus, they were able to kill monsters like needle wolves that human apprentice warriors would simply be slaughtered by, earning large quantities of experience points. Zadiris had joined the other ghouls in defeating monsters such as flying sharks and raptors, and promptly reached level 100 in the apprentice mage job. Incidentally, her level as a monster didn't increase. It seemed that experience points were split separately into job experience points and monster experience points. I know that you are eager to try, but you must be relaxing for now. It should be the date we promised, your birthday, by the time Teria's back is healed. Zadiris, well, I don't know how it'll go though. Vandaliu. With the cannot learn existing jobs curse, Vandaliu could not acquire a job that had already been confirmed to exist in Lambda. He wanted to try, so he was half full of expectations but also half full of anxiety at the fact that he might not be able to acquire a job. Well, in the case of the latter, he would simply have to concentrate on making the undead and ghouls stronger. Ugh, Vansama, is my back in such a bad state? Teria. Not knowing about Vandaliu's curse, Teria assumed that he was talking about her back, so he had to spend some effort in calming her down. And then Vandaliu's birthday came. Vandaliu was brought to the royal castle. Bakken, please just think that you've been tricked and put this bag over your head. Saria, don't forget to use the blindfold and earplugs before that, okay? Rita. Vandaliu froze as Saria and Rita approached him with a leather bag and a blindfold made of cloth. At first, Vandaliu thought this might be a Gekukuju, but this seemed to be a planned surprise, so he excitedly put on the blindfold on and the leather bag over his head. From the outside, he looked just like a child being kidnapped. Translator's note: this is a Japanese term that's similar to rebellion/mutiny/coup d'etat/betrayal, where those in lower positions such as vassals overthrow the ones in the higher positions such as lords. He's here. I took a lot of effort in bringing these here for you. Borkus. Me too. I brought in a lot of them as well. Vigoro. Stop competing with each other already when we haven't even shown him yet. Bajia. After a while, things suddenly became noisy. Thinking that a bigger surprise was waiting for him than he'd originally thought, Vandaliu's heart began throbbing. Happy birthday! The leather bag and blindfold were removed. Vandaliu saw a great dining hall that had been built after Talosheim began trading with the Orbalm Kingdom in order to hold buffet parties and balls like the higher societies of humans. Borkus, Vigoro, Zadiris, Nwaza, Bajia, Teria and many others had gathered in this vast place. The dining hall had once been magnificent, but now it was ruined, a mere shadow of what it once was. As if to replace the decorations and ornaments that had been lost, a great number of corpses covered in colorful feathers and scales had been lined up around it. These are dinosaurs. Vandaliu. Nobody knew their exact names, and they were likely very different from the dinosaurs that had once inhabited Earth, but their bone structures were easily identifiable, those of dinosaurs at a glance. Corpses resembling Tyrannosaurus rexes, with enormous sharp teeth growing in their mouths. Corpses resembling pteranodons, clearly different from birds and bats. Corpses resembling triceratopses, with large horns growing on their heads. Corpses resembling stegosauruses, with sheets of bone growing on their backs and spikes on their tails. Some of their horns were chipped, and their bellies had been sewn shut. They weren't unharmed. But they all seemed relatively fresh. This is our present. We heard from Mother that you wanted scaled monsters that weren't dragons, Van, so everyone gathered them here. Bajia. There were quite a few of them coming out of the dungeons, though we've taken out their blood and organs, since they would have rotted otherwise. Vigoro. It seemed that the information that Vandaliu liked dinosaurs had been leaked by Zadiris. Well, perhaps because nobody had known what could be categorized as a dinosaur, enormous crocodile and snake monsters, as well as a 3-meter-long cat-like carnivorous creature possessing sharp claws and teeth with scales covering its whole body were included in there as well. But this did nothing to inhibit the emotions that Vandalyu felt. Everyone. Thank you. Vandalyu. He was moved to tears. He knew how hard it must have been to bring the monsters' corpses all the way back from the devil's nests and dungeons, even if their blood and organs had been taken out first. The cursed carriages he had made for crossing the Boundary Mountain range had probably helped, but even so, it wouldn't have been easy. Vandalyu! Darshia! Darshia's spirit appeared from the bone fragment that Saria brought forward. You know, during the time leading up until now, there were a lot of times when I thought that everything was over. Your father was killed, I was captured, but you still turned 3 years old. Thank you so much. Make sure you become even healthier and stronger from now on, okay? Darshia! Vandalyu had cried so many tears that it would be impossible to count them. Tears of anger, frustration, grief, misery, suffering, hatred, sorrow, resentment, rage, loathing. But this might have been the first time he was crying tears of happiness. What a pleasant feeling it was. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, everyone. Please keep taking care of me from now on. Vandalyu. That was why he would live on. And he would resurrect his mother. The tears of joy that he would cry after resurrecting her would surely be pleasant as well. There was no way that he would be killed. There was no way that he would die. As for anyone standing in his way, he would kill them and make them his allies.